Hello, everybody, and welcome to another thought-provoking conversation hosted by Asia Society France right here in our new offices in Paris. My name is Serge Dumont, and I'm the chairman of Asia Society France. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting David and Sue Rockefeller. Their last name is known around the world, and from the US to China, from Japan to France, it is a synonym for wealth, as John D. Rockefeller Sr. was the first American billionaire, but also for modern philanthropy, which is the focus of our talk today. On a personal level, they are two dear, exceptional friends with whom I share many fond memories around the world. This makes today even more special. David, Sue, and all of us here today share a deep connection with Asia and France, where their family's philanthropy has had a significant and lasting impact. I was meant to host this discussion in person from our office, but I regrettably have been in contact with someone who tested positive for COVID. And although I am testing negative, I decided to play it safe and apply David and Sue's family motto to protect what is precious. And that includes not taking any risk with your health and friendship. I will continue to self-isolate for an extra day. Not spending quality time in Paris together, as we did on your last visit to France, Sue and David, is painful. And I thank you both for taking the time to come to our new office and doing this talk. It is particularly meaningful to have you here in Paris with us because your ancestor, David, John D. Rockefeller, created Asia Society in New York in 1956, recognizing the need for mutual understanding between East and West. And here we are, 66 years later, launching Asia Society France, the newest Asia Society center in the world and the first in the European Union. Because mutual understanding between East and West still needs deepening, and the consequences for not doing so are becoming dangerously apparent for all to see. We are glad Europe and France are now part of the conversation. I will now turn to our acting executive director, Valérie Terranova, who will give us a brief introduction of our speakers today before we start our conversation.
Thank you, Serge, and thank you, David and Susan, for being here today. I'll be very brief, just to remind you that David here is a long-standing entrepreneur and philanthropist. He has held many positions amongst Rockefeller-related entities. He has served as a trustee and chairman of the Rockefeller Foundation and was the president of the Rockefeller Family Fund, and he was twice chairman of the Rockefeller Capital Management. He also sits at the Council on Foreign Relations. And do I need to say that Mr. Rockefeller is a passionate supporter of arts, and especially Asian art. He sits at the Asian Cultural Council. He's been a long-time advisor of the Premium Imperiale in Japan, and is a life trustee of the MoMA in New York. But even more than that, David is a distinguished sailor, and he has made a life commitment to help save oceans, which is also a passion that Susan shares with him. Both are part of this program called Oceana. Maybe they will tell us a word about that. Susan is a passionate environmental activist. Can I say you're an activist, Susan? Yes. And she has a lifelong mission to make our planet more beautiful, healthier, and more abundant for all who share it. And she has set up a method of engaging broader audiences in her work to protect the environment. And she advises many global renowned business and financial institution on sustainability. I will stop there. Serge, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Valerie. David, I will start with you with the first question. It's, as I mentioned, it's very special to have you.
If you allow me, Serge, I forgot to say something to the audience. You can ask questions in the Q using the Q&A button on the at the bottom of your screen. And if I keep my phone on the table, it's not that I am badly educated, but it's only because I get the question on the phone. So please send your questions during the conversation, and we'll make sure that Serge, David, and Susan can get them.
Excellent, and thank you for your help, Valerie. We've had to scramble to organize things in connection with, in view of the situation that I'm facing with this COVID positive situation. Now, David, as I mentioned, it's a real pleasure and very special to have the descendant of the founder of Asia Society here at Asia Society France, the newest center in the impressive network of 14 Asia Society centers that span the globe. And from the early days of your family's philanthropy, Asia has been a deep focus. And this is clear just by looking at what John D. Rockefeller did right after the Second World War and the Korean War, starting Asia Society to build mutual trust. Now, can you tell us about the importance of Asia to you and Sue, and whether you think that John D. Rockefeller's vision is still relevant today?
Yes, thank you so much, Serge, and it's wonderful to see you on the screen. We regret that you're not able to be with us, and we also remember many wonderful times, including in Asia, especially Beijing with you. So the question of relevance, absolutely. I think that what John D. Rockefeller III, my uncle, saw and felt after visiting Asia many times, and then, of course, post-World War II, he saw that personal friendships and cultural connection could be antidotes to hostility. I think that message is even more important and even truer today, and something that Susan and I believe very strongly. For the last almost 20 years, we've been making annual trips from New York, our home, to Asia, except for the last 2 COVID years. And because of our belief in this, and we've certainly visited the beautiful Asia Society headquarters in Hong Kong, and have taken tours there and actually spoken in a similar way at one of their events. And the Asian Cultural Council, which John III also started many, many years ago, about at the same time, which brings leading artists or artists nearing the peak of their career across the Pacific Ocean, either from Asia to the US or from the US to Asia. So we are both on that board together as well. And so these ligatures, these ties that are so important, we are trying our best to continue.
Excellent. I hear that the Asian Cultural Center just had a beautiful gala. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago?
Very recently in New York, yes. Yeah. It was a great success, both socially and monetarily.
Fantastic. Well, look, I regret that I missed that one too, unfortunately. We talked about Asia. Now let's talk about France. In fact, your family has very deep connection to France. In fact, I remember the last time you visited, just before COVID, we had a beautiful dinner at the Versailles Palace, where you were recognized for the contributions your family made to preserving and restoring the treasures of French heritage. That includes the Versailles Palace, but also Fontainebleau, and also the creation of the Cité Universitaire, which is a major institution in Paris. And I believe you are now involved in La Bibliothèque Nationale, the Bibliothèque Richelieu. Can you tell us about your connection with France and what is the place that France holds in your heart?
Yes, I have a very close relationship with France. We are so happy to be back in France and in Paris for the first time in 3 years, for the reasons you know. And the Versailles trip was one of the highlights from 3 years ago, the centennial of the Treaty of Versailles. So personally, I was a student of French early on, and my parents spoke very good French, sadly better than I do today. But they took me as a schoolboy to see the beauties of Paris and the French countryside. And so I learned early on the extraordinary variety and depth of French culture, everything from food to art and architecture, and have never looked back on that friendship. I made some very close friendships here with French contemporaries, and in fact, in these last 2 days, we will have had dinner with my 2 best men friends in Paris. So once again, the human aspect of connection in addition to the cultural.
Wonderful. I actually read online, so it must be true, that your family's ancestors were French Huguenots, the Rockefeller family, who had fled France under Louis XIV in the 17th century. What do you know about that?
I have many disappointments concerning my heritage. I have wanted to be French and Viking and Scottish, and it turns out I am none of those. I am mostly German with some English and Irish mixed in. So I think the official history of our family is more of the Rockefeller side, that is more about the Rhine Valley than it is one of the beautiful rivers of France. Sorry.
Well, somebody in France tried to appropriate something, but they missed it. Well, look, a symbol of wealth and power, the Rockefeller family also defined modern philanthropy as we know it. Your father was one of the first philanthropists to sign the Giving Pledge, initiated by Bill and Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett to encourage billionaires to donate at least half of their fortune. Can you tell us how you would define philanthropy today?
Well, philanthropy, the love of mankind, of course, is a Greek origin word, and it comes in many forms. There isn't only one flavor of philanthropy, but in the US, we have the benefit of a tax law which encourages philanthropy by individuals and philanthropic institutions, also by business. And so philanthropy has flourished largely because of these favorable tax treatments. And also, I think, because of the belief in the American spirit of individuals supporting each other and supporting their community. I know that the mécénat in France is the variety of philanthropy, which unfortunately tax laws here don't encourage to the same extent. I would say philanthropy in the US is flourishing in terms of the numbers of dollars, the billions of dollars that are given every year by private individuals in particular. It used to be that we gave 90% of our dollars to churches, synagogues, and religious institutions. That, I think, has subsided, and we now give to the environment, to social institutions, to cultural institutions, and some of the newly very wealthy, the billionaires in the U.S., are giving large sums, and you mentioned the Giving Pledge, which is a pledge to give half of one's wealth before one's death. And some of them are pledging to leave only with a few dollars. So there's a lot of enthusiasm about philanthropy in the U.S.
Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us that philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which made philanthropy necessary. I'm afraid that you've been asked this question a million times, but how do you solve the contradiction between making tremendous amounts of money with activities that are not necessarily in line with the common good, and spending part of this money to help solve problems that these very activities have generated or accelerated? And as a related question, your family has announced in 2016 that the Family Investment Fund was divesting from its petrochemical assets, the very source of the Rockefeller world. Can you tell us about the rationale behind this decision?
Yes, well, it's a complex matter. I think when my great-grandfather, John D. Rockefeller Sr., was building the Standard Oil Company, the source of our family's wealth, he was not thinking of petrochemicals as a sin for which he would have to redeem himself through philanthropy. That was not his philosophy. He did become very rich because the demand for oil and gas exploded all over the world, you might say. And it was he and his son who then began to ask themselves the question, what should I do with this money? And there are many people today who are making their funds in a similar fashion. However, science over time teaches us many lessons, and one of the lessons we have learned, or frankly are still learning, is the negative impact of oil and gas, fossil fuels on the environment. And so, in fact, it turns out we're poisoning our air and our water and increasing the amount of carbon and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and in the waters around the world. If my great-grandfather were here today, Serge, I think he would be horrified, and he would be probably in the solar and wind business, you know. So to answer the second part of your question, members of my family, Susan and I included, have felt very strongly that we should speak out against the fossil fuels and urge companies, energy companies, to diversify into alternative energy, and banks and other companies that support the fossil fuels to divest themselves of those and realize that in the long term, fossil fuels are a very bad investment. And so the family has urged our family foundations, some of us individually, to divest from fossil fuels. I think it's the right thing today.
Thank you. David, with some exception, of course, most of the pledge signatories are American, and although the original patron was from ancient Rome, would you say that philanthropy today is an American concept? How does it apply to other parts of the world, such as Africa or Asia, which you know well?
Yes. So I think it is true that probably the U.S., by however you measure it, is the most philanthropic nation in the world. If there's another, I should learn about it. And I think it would be wonderful if there were more opportunities for philanthropists globally, because frankly, what philanthropy can do to solve the world's problems is usually to create some leading edge opportunities. We're not like the World Bank. We're not like the great corporations or the government agencies and multilateral agencies that have much more money. But we can lead the way, and I think that's a very important role for philanthropy. I'm very proud that the U.S. has led the way. We would love to have more company. Now, you mentioned Asia and Africa. In the meantime, there are problems in other parts of the world that also American philanthropy is trying to address. The The Rockefeller Foundation has offices in Kenya and in Thailand, for example, and a base of operations in Italy. So, and it has always been a global philanthropy. So there are opportunities to give not only where the money is created, but all around the world. And I think global philanthropy is such an important way for people of wealth or institution of wealth to share that with others who don't have as fortunate circumstances.
Yes, as you say, the world is in pretty bad shape. And in fact, as we see it from pandemics to the war in Ukraine, lives of millions are being impacted. And the famine, the specter of famine is actually returning to many parts of the world. And we see money pouring on Ukraine, water, sanitation, waste treatment that cause millions of deaths each year. But what we see also is other causes that receive much less attention. And I really wonder if some causes are not more glamorous than others, and how do we ensure that philanthropy puts money where it is the most needed?
Yes, well, certainly there are critics, Serge, of philanthropy because it is a freedom of choice, you might say, of the philanthropist or the foundation. And in a way, it's the government trusting that these institutions and people will make good decisions. And it's actually not easy to make good decisions about philanthropy in a strategic fashion any more than it's easy to make a good investment in business. There are many factors. What I feel today is that we need a mixture of what is really what I would call charity, which is direct help for humans suffering, such as in the Ukraine, but in many other parts of the world as well. And at the same time, we need to be looking at the root causes of these problems, the failure of the Cold War to stay in its warm place, and it became cold again. So maybe philanthropists, for example, in addition to politicians, failed to see the specter of the intentions of the Soviet Union and then Russia. So there's a lot to do. And I think so far, it has been net appropriate, in my view, to trust the collective individual decisions of philanthropy, along, of course, with government decisions on how to help the rest of the world.
Let me ask you a tongue-in-cheek question, David. You're a sailor. And what do you think can help us navigate the troubled waters we're living in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sailors, when they're out at sea, their boat is their universe. And so I think sailors have the same kind of experience that we small people do on this earth. We are here for a short time. There are many challenges in life, whether it's personal health or environment or social problems. And when you're on a boat, you depend upon your crew, and you need a good crew. You also need a good captain, and you need a strong boat. So I think there are many ways in which, when I am sailing at sea, which I've been fortunate enough to do for many years, that I'm thinking about how responsible one is to protect all the living beings on that boat from disaster if I'm the captain. And if I'm the crew, I try to pick a good captain. I think we need some more good captains in the world running our countries, but I won't name which ones.
We'll stay silent on this. I'll take the fifth. Soon, let me turn to you. And I don't know if I can only see David on my screen. I'm not sure if we see Sue. You're a passionate philanthropist. You're an environmentalist, you're a conservationist, as well as an artist of great talent. And you use several platforms to leverage and spread awareness. Can you tell us about the trends in philanthropy that you have noticed, and what do you think has changed over time?
Well, first of all, Serge, it's great to see you, and Valerie, thank you for creating this wonderful event. I think one of the major trends that I've seen is that we have gone from more institutional philanthropy and family philanthropy to younger people that have created enormous wealth, to look at impact philanthropy. So instead of sort of using philanthropic dollars to go, using the tax-free incentive per se, a lot of younger people are looking at impact. So they're saying, what are some of the major challenges and what are some of the disruptive technologies that can actually be a solution to the climate crisis or the healthcare crisis? And they're putting their dollars into businesses that can help accelerate more quickly, because these businesses could go to scale. So I think there's a real shift, especially amongst younger wealth generators, to take their wealth and actually use it in impact with business. And I'd say that's the biggest trend that I've seen, so that you've got both, giving to art institutions and cultural institutions and churches, and you still have the charity component of helping the poor and most vulnerable, and then a lot of people saying, how do we deal with these, what they're called wicked problems? How do we create solutions, and using the power of business and scaling those solutions? And that's pretty much what I've seen as a major shift in the trends of philanthropy.
So you've told me many times that your family's motto is preserving what is precious. What do you mean by that?
So David and I have a motto: to protect what is precious. And we actually have 3 pillars. We have family, we have art, and we have nature. And when we travel around the world, we find that it is something that resonates. It goes beyond politics, and everybody can relate to the power of family and creating a foundation of love and cohesiveness within the family unit, but also looking at the global family. So particularly as a mother, I want to look at the global family of mothers around the world and children, and find ways that we can lift the potential of women, since they are half the sky. And if you look at a lot of the climate issues, if you educate women and give them the power to make choices and have their own agency, it's one of the most powerful ways that you can draw down carbon. Then we have art, which we believe is a universal language. It really is sort of the common language of the heart. And it's a way that we can build bridges. And that's a big part of what David and I do together with the Asian Cultural Council, with my work as a filmmaker. And it's a way of really having people connect to the human heart and the cultural diversity of the highest expression of the arts around the world. And then the environment, and nature, if the environment is not healthy, if we do not have clean water and clean air and a healthy ecosystem, we will not be healthy either. So we look at those 3 areas, family, art, and nature, the interconnections between them, as a way of creating a healthy world, a healthy people, and a healthy planet.
One of the great talents you have is storytelling, and you've been really focusing on storytelling, using the power of the media, your documentary, filmmaking, photography, design, and all other powerful tools to inspire awareness and action. Can you elaborate on your belief and your attachment to storytelling, and give us some of the instances that you've experienced when it comes to using storytelling in an effective manner to spread an important message?
So I would say that one of the most powerful ways that we can create empathy in the world is through storytelling, and especially with the film work that I do. Storytelling allows people to understand and step into the shoes of others. So I think the power of storytelling is more important than ever. We have tremendous problems in the world, and the most important, I think, sort of issue and challenge of our time is to really have people understand the other as themselves, and to understand that we are connected, and to really have a better sense of how we can feel and empathize to many of the issues that are facing people around the world. And I think stories, I mean, for me, films and great storytelling brings people that kind of perspective. And I do both documentaries and I do art house narrative films. I think you've seen, you know, I showed one of my films at the Asia Society in Hong Kong called Food for Thought, Food for Life. I had a film called Mission of Mermaids, a love letter to the ocean, which linked the myth of the mermaid to ocean health. And then some sort of art house films, Capernaum, that really speak to the issues of our time, mostly climate related, but also tell a story that has a call to action pretty much at the end. So Mission of Mermaids was about our ocean crisis, our plastic pollution crisis, and then getting people to understand what's at stake in terms of climate, ocean acidification, and that we have to work to deal with the fact that our ocean feeds over 1 billion people a healthy meal each day, and we need to keep our oceans abundant. So I use the power of storytelling to tell stories about what I think is most important, and the same with Food for Thought, Food for Life, that we have as we know from COVID, we've seen the fragility of our food system, what happened to the Ukraine and Russia, we see what's happening with food insecurity. So how do you tell stories that allow people to think about bioregional, regenerative agriculture in a local system, but also look at the global supply chain and how we can work together to better understand personal choices in terms of how we eat, because we eat, if we're lucky, 3 times a day, but also the global issues connected to climate and our food system.
Thank you, Sue. Let's talk briefly about another of your platform, Musings. Can you tell us what it is? And I know you're absolutely passionate about it, and we're all avid readers, so please tell us about it and how do you hope to impact people through it?
So Musings came about when I was thinking, what would I like in my email that was inspiring and that I would actually open up? I think many of us get, you know, just barraged by so many emails, and I wanted to profile mostly entrepreneurs on the cutting edge of innovation, responsible innovation, and also just to provide ideas and inspiration for a better world. So I partnered with nonprofit organizations to vet some of the best and the brightest entrepreneurs that are working on responsible innovation and solutions to some of the problems that are facing, especially businesses, whether it's sustainable packaging, whether it's looking at the supply chain issues and technology that can better assist people logistically, and then looking at health and beauty, and also looking at global change makers around the world, mostly teen leaders and entrepreneurs in their early 20s. And it's been an incredible journey of 10 years of building the business. And I'm at a juncture right now where I have a company that is interested in acquiring Musings, so it will have even greater impact, which I'm very much looking forward to. But it comes bi-monthly into your email box, and it's just a snapshot and story of some of the most interesting entrepreneurs that I'm finding that come across, you know, through my research that I want to share with my community. And it goes to about 10,000 sort of high-level influencers, and then potentially to about 12 million through various platforms.
Wonderful. Well, look, you're both so inspiring in what you do, and you're personally so involved. I know one of your passion is Oceana. Can you also talk briefly about your involvement with Oceana? And talking about storytelling, is probably one of the best storytellers on the planet. They do a remarkable job.
Well, thank you. Both David and I are on the board of Oceana. I've been on for about 12 years now, and We both think they're doing the best work globally, to really protect our oceans, and they work primarily on enforcing fishing regulation, minimizing bycatch and protecting fish habitat, and working country by country on plastic pollution as well. So we have some of the best scientists and advocates that are really working to protect our oceans, especially for the poor and most vulnerable. So if you were looking at sort of nutrition, fish and nutrition, and the importance of how fish help, especially women and infants, on brain development. So the importance of sort of making the link between, fish as a nutritional need for many of the poor around the world. And also in terms of climate change, if you do the research, if we can keep our oceans abundant, we will not continue to clear cut forests and add more land to agriculture, which is, a huge contributor to climate emissions, especially beef and cattle. So we are big supporters and love the Oceana community and the board and love the work that they're doing. And, if we can say in our lifetime that we are alleviating the suffering of millions and billions, over like a billion people will be, having a fish meal a day, and to keep our oceans abundant for that, I feel that we can sleep really well at night and feel really proud of the work that they're doing.
You've also been, you're passionate about the fashion industry, which is also one of the main polluter in the world. And I know you've been quite an advocate in that space. Can you briefly tell us what is being done in that space and what, can be done or should be done?
I could spend hours on that, but there's a lot being done. There's a fashion pact where different companies are signing on, especially to look at ways to create more transparency along their supply chain. There's something called seed or soil to shirt. So they're looking at sort of transparency from actually how the cotton or the linen or whatever the natural material is, how it's being grown, to the transportation, looking at the worker and the labor rights, all the way to the end product. So I think that there's a consolidation, there's a growing awareness. A lot of people are talking about conscious consumerism instead of the conspicuous consumption, looking at and really raising awareness about really the problems of fast fashion and what does it mean to actually have things that you can keep almost like a luxury. What is it that is long-lasting and timeless? And there's a lot of movement toward the sort of reuse, the real, the secondary markets for a lot of clothing, because much of it is being thrown into the trash, into landfills, and it's just a complete waste of the natural resources. So I think there's a growing movement of awareness. There's a growing movement of material innovation that's moving people away from cotton and into bamboo and other more regenerative materials. So it's an exciting time, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
My last question before I turn to the floor for questions from the audience. And it's a question to both David and you. Today you went to visit the Bibliothèque Nationale, the Bibliothèque Richelieu, a major institution in France, and you've been supporting the renovation, I understand. Can you tell us about this particular project, what led you into it, and what did you take out of the visit?
You want to say that you weren't there?
I actually wasn't there. I had tea with some friends that are in from Austria, so I actually didn't go. So David will answer that.
So I guess I should speak about that. And so the Bibliothèque Nationale, which of course built a very large and well-known building several decades ago to house the incredible collection, also has, at least abroad, a less well-known building. Here in Paris, it should be well-known on the Richelieu wing, the original wing. And I was in a luncheon with the president of the Bibliothèque Nationale 3 years ago, given by the leader of one of the Carnegie foundations, Vartan Gregorian, an amazing Lebanese Armenian. And Vartan was giving, it was quite a typical fundraising lunch in New York, and a dozen people and representing institutions around the city were called there by Vartan to hear the story of the renovation. And I was one of those lucky people to be called. And it was 6 months later, I knew I was coming to Versailles in Paris. And so I decided to pay a visit to the site, which was very much under construction at that time. I became persuaded to make a gift to the renovation, and I made it in the name of my longtime French friend Jean-Noël Jeannenet, who actually had been a president of the library at an earlier date. And Jean-Noël and I actually visited that site today to see how they were coming along with the renovation, and I can report it's spectacular. The reading rooms, of course, are well known and amazing, but what's less well known, as I understand it, are the period rooms and the rooms full of treasures from the ancient world, as well as from later times, and a really extraordinary museum, high museum quality work that certainly to me was not known. It's a library, so we think of a library as being about books and papers, not so much about objects. But the renovation will emphasize the multifaceted aspects of the Richelieu and of the Bibliothèque Nationale. And I believe it's reopening in September, first privately and shortly thereafter to the general public, who will see rooms that they have never seen before, I understand it. Very exciting.
Well, maybe I'll reach out to you, because we would be delighted as Asia Society France to organize private visits for members, if that's at all possible.
I'm sure that you will have influence, Serge, and you don't need me to do that, but let me know.
Thank you so much. Well, look, I will now turn to the audience, because I'm sure there are a number of questions, and I want to give them the opportunity to ask them to you. Valérie?
Thank you, Serge. So we have some questions. The first one, maybe I'll turn to David. You mentioned that businesses have to work to help better the range of issues. How do you envision better working dynamics between policymakers and businesses?
Well, that's a complicated question, because businesses are responsible to their shareholders, and traditionally shareholders think about financial return in a fairly simple way. Increasingly, however, through what we call ESG, or environment, social, and governmental considerations, businesses are being judged on their ability to do good, not just to make money. I think this is a slow process because shareholders haven't all caught up with this. On the other hand, some shareholders are ahead of the game and have learned that by voting the proxies, they can vote out an administration which is not being sensitive to the environment, for example. And they can vote for companies which are looking, I mentioned fossil fuel companies or energy companies before. In my view, the energy companies which are looking toward investing in the future of alternative fuels are the ones which will be successful.
Thank you. And I'll turn to Susan with a question about creating empathy. You spoke about creating empathy, and how do you handle that given not only all of the challenges our world is facing, how do you overcome isolationism tendency that we are seeing in the world in order to generate empathy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the arts will play a vital role in that. And thinking about even what there was something at the Venice Biennale called the Hope Forum, and they're looking at ways to bring artists together to talk about the crucial crises of our time. And I think that people are so sort of paralyzed by the enormity of these issues that are facing us, and that the only way that we can come together is to understand our interconnectedness. And I think that empathy is one way. It's sort of the gateway, along with understanding the power of gratitude, that we're here, that we have a role to play, each one of us. And I think most importantly, the arts will shed a light. And when I think about, I just read a great book by Susan Cain called Bittersweet, and it's about how do we hold the bitterness with the sweetness of life. And I think, we're at a point globally where there is so much tragedy and there has been so much isolation. And how do you understand that dialectic? And I think empathy is sort of the pathway towards better connectivity.
And one other question, you mentioned that to convey all these messages, we needed a strong storytelling. And can you tell us why you chose filmmaking rather than other media, such as the social media, or is it because it's more efficient?
No, actually, filmmaking is not that efficient. It takes a long time. I am both a producer and a director of short format films that can be used in collaboration with panel discussions. I also have made feature films, but I do have an active social media presence on Instagram. And as a writer with the Musings digital magazine, that's one way of amplifying these ideas. So I actually work in a variety of ways. And I think that film is very powerful because people are used to, especially during COVID, people were on the streaming services, and I'm a member of the Academy, and I vote on the different films. So I get to see a lot of films. And I just think that people want to be entertained, and the ability to tell a story and move people. And, I'll give one example. I think, CODA, if you haven't seen it, it won the Academy Award about a deaf, CODA means child of deaf adults. And it's a beautiful story that really highlights and amplifies disabilities and the need for people to have a deeper understanding of the deaf community. So I think that films have an incredible place in the world of elevating consciousness, and the arts do, but there's many different ways, through writing, through poetry, through music, through dance.
And Coda was actually, I know, first a French film.
It was first a French film,
Yes.
yes.
So the idea was first produced in France, but apparently they didn't use deaf people as the actors. And the thing that made the American film even more, I think, impactful is that at least 4 or more of the principal actors were themselves deaf and used sign language. That we recommend.
We recommend it. It's one of the most powerful films we've seen in the past couple of years.
Well, we can also think about Blood Diamond, who has changed,
yes,
which has facilitated the adoption of the Kimberley process in Africa. We have quite a provocative question here. He said that protect what is precious is your family motto, and the 3 most important things that you have cited don't include money. So is money on your list of important things at all?
Want me to take
Sure,
a
you
shot at
start, and
that?
then
So money in one's life is a tool. I think Midas got into trouble when he loved it too much. And I think we need to respect that money is a tool. And those of us who have excess beyond the needs of daily life are very fortunate. But I think then we have a responsibility to actually, yes, protect those precious resources, because spending unwisely is meaning that you're losing the opportunity to do something important. So I am grateful for the money, and we are grateful for the money that has come to us, but we see it as a tool, just like the time that we have to live. And we don't know how much that is, but we should use it when we have it.
Yeah, and I'd say just a clarification too, that those are the pillars, but obviously they help inform our philanthropy. And we feel really grateful that we have funds that we can then, use wisely to, protect what is precious to us and what we believe is precious to all.
Thank you. We have a question related to Asia Society. And beyond the overall mission of Asia Society, would you have any advice specific to Asia Society in France, and what impact you could expect from it, knowing that you have a lot of history with Asia?
Want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Well, that's a good question. I'm sure that your chairman has many ideas, and he didn't give me any hints for how I should answer that question. But I think the Asia Society has had an interesting historical challenge of how much it should be a cultural force and how much it should enter the political discussion. So I think maybe that's one of the more interesting issues that it has, and I believe Kevin Rudd is the current global chair. Is that right? And of course, Kevin, former Prime Minister of Australia, speaks Mandarin, has been very direct about his objections to the way that Xi Jinping is taking China. So at the moment, you have a very political voice at the lead, and I think all of us need to think about how we balance those things. When we personally go to China, for example, we are very careful, because also we're not politicians or diplomats, and we're very careful how we speak about sensitive subjects, because we want to retain the friendship. So I think that's a challenge for the Asia Society, which after all was founded in order to increase positive exchanges between all of the nations. And I think it's a fascinating challenge how you will decide which way to go.
And I would just add that I think, the building of bridges and what we've seen that's been very successful, the entry is really through art and culture, and there's so much incredible culture and art in France, and to sort of create that interchange, and whether it's having some of the members of the Asia Society go and do a trip to Beijing and be hosted, but I think showing up and building trust really comes through the patience of time and the patience of visitation. And we've been to, I think, Asia over 20 or 18 times together. And it's that showing up and people knowing that we will be there, that we will have a meal, that we will show a film, that we will be in conversation, is what has built incredible trust and friendship. And I think that is really what needs to happen. And Serge, thanks to you with, sharing your home and culture when you were living in Beijing. And we've spent a lot of time in China together, in Hong Kong and in Beijing. And I just think it's that repetitiveness of connection and showing up and building those relationships.
Thank you. Maybe it's not a very quick last question, and that's a question from me. Would you say that Asian cultures are fitter than Western to the coming world, knowing, regarding the place they give to the relationship between the man and mankind and nature, for instance, or with the animals, and really the relationship with food, or you think our values are exhausted, or are a bit old-fashioned compared, and what can we learn from Asia?
Want to start?
Yeah, I would just say, so much, whether it's the philosophy, whether it's Confucianism, whether it's the whole notion of going back to go forward, the simplicity of some of the old ways that some of the older, more successful businessmen in China are talking about, or at least to us. I think the richness of the arts and the poetry, and the innovation amongst the young Chinese. I mean, I was in Shanghai. I was a judge for the Material Innovation Prize for the Caring Group. And the innovation, the excitement, the art, the metaverse, whether you want to go there or not, there is really exciting things happening with the NFT world and fashion. And so I think there is a huge amount to learn. And what I have found is that the Chinese artists and filmmakers want to connect. They want to interact. They want that connection. And to me, that could be the most powerful way that we can create common cause and share our common humanity. We've also done a lot with food security and working on food issues, and it's easier through the arts than it is through the environment and conservation. So we elevate discussion about the preciousness of the environment, but it's through the arts that we do it. And there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Yes, the very last one.
Hi, my name is Awi. I'm from Asia.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yes, good question. Is there such thing as over philanthropy where things get done? At what point philanthropy become over? Meaning that you overdo it. In a sense that people say, hey, please don't give more aid to Africa. Because Africa have been historically have gotten a lot of aid from the world. They need a different solution. Having done a lot of philanthropy, a lot to understand, is there such thing as over philanthropy, or is there a point where philanthropy become unnecessary or overdone?
I'll just repeat the question for our online audience. We was just asking if there is a point where we go too far, and where philanthropy is going too far. For instance, should we stop giving aid to developing countries in Africa?
Yeah. I just thought that you have done so much.
Yeah, I think that there is certainly misguided philanthropy, and there are dollars which have been, you might say, wasted. On the other hand, philanthropy has been at its best, in my view, experimental and taking risks. So I think it's important for philanthropists not always to give to the obvious things, but to give where maybe others are not giving. But we have plenty of room for much more philanthropy in the world. There are so many problems. I think the problem is not in general too much, but too little, and sometimes it can be misdirected. But I think, just back quickly on the last question, I don't think any place in the world has all the answers, but there certainly are many answers that we can find in Asia. And Asia isn't only China, as the Asia Society knows very well. It's so many interesting cultures who can give us answers. And I think in terms of China, China has found that making money is not everything, and that in some cases, making money and the development of cities brings life that's less close to the soil and less close to families. So they're rethinking, what the right way to go is. But thank you very much for the chance, Serge, to be with you today and to be with the Asia Society Paris. Congratulations on joining the team.
Thank you so much, Sue and David, and thanks to all of you for participating. I am sure that now you understand the affection that I have for David and Sue and the reasons behind them. These are truly exceptional people. Just to answer partly, to add a little bit of color to the question you were asking about Asia Society in France, I totally agree with your last comment, David. Asia Society is not just about China. China is obviously an important part, given the size of the country. But as a matter of fact, this year we're focusing on India, and we're focusing on all the countries of Asia, ASEAN, Japan, Korea, and other countries. And the other aspect, to address Sue's comment, culture is very central to our activities. We focus on geopolitics, but we also focus on culture, education, business, philanthropy, technology. So we look at all the dimensions of the interactions between Asian societies and our societies in Europe. And we look at the West as Europe and the United States with all the diversity that we bring to the conversation. So we hope that our endeavor will be able to contribute to some extent to the building of bridges. And we believe that these are more necessary than ever. And I want to congratulate you and commend you, because you both are great bridge builders, and we love you for what you do. And I hope that you'll be able to follow what we are doing around the launch of the formal global launch of Asia Society the week of October 10th in Brussels and Paris, and that somehow you can be associated with our activities and perhaps be with us again. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your trip in Paris. And my apologies for not being able to be physically with you, only in spirit. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Serge.